Yes.
Everyone ready?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
All right, here we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, March 4th, 2025 regular town meeting for the town of Southern Shores. If you'll please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We'll have a moment of silence now. Thank you. Council, we have an agenda in front of us. Are there any amendments to tonight's agenda?
Mayor,
Yes.
I move to amend the agenda to add an item of new business, and that would be for the council to consider issuing a letter of support for the water quality permit for the Mid-Currituck Bridge.
Very good. We have a motion to amend the agenda as stated. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carries. We have an amended agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. We have an approved amended agenda. Thank you. Council, in our consent agenda tonight, we have a couple of budget amendments. One for the cemetery, one for 13 Skyline. We have an approval of the 2025-2026 GEAC budget. And this would be a great time for me to acknowledge Councilmember Rob Nielsen, who is our representative on that committee. And I would like to express my appreciation for him doing that work for the town. And we have a resolution in support of legislation restoring zoning authority to local governments and minutes approval. Any questions or discussion about the consent agenda? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Thanks. We have a couple of presentations tonight, and we'll start with one on housing, and I'd like to turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Matt Neal to introduce our speaker.
I'm going off the cuff here. Tonight we have Donna Creve, who is the chairperson of the Dare Community Housing Task Force, which is a mouthful. It's I can't even come up with the acronym fast. I trip over it. But Donna prepared a report. The mayor and I serve on this task force with her and about 25,000 other people. And we've been working for the last year to try to find some common ground and path forward for housing solutions in Dare County. As we know, median home price is pretty high and incomes have not kept up. So I want to turn it over to Donna. She performed a wonderful feat in putting together this report for us last year, and we adopted it in December, and she's been making the rounds doing a presentation. So, thank you, Donna.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me. As Matt said, I am the chairman of the Dare Community Housing Task Force, and it does feel like sometimes we have 25,000 people on there. We have 28 members on the task force. Mayor Elizabeth Moray and Matt are both on there, and they also serve on my subcommittees as well as a host of other people. And we prepared a report there in December that was adopted, and I have been going around to the local governments and some other organizations doing the report. And you guys asked me to come up here, so that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to see if I can get the technology to work. The task force prepared their report, and it was adopted by unanimous vote at their December meeting. It summarizes all of the research that we completed in 2024 and the presentations that we heard. It presents statistical information on demographics of housing in our community. It makes conclusions and sets the task and priorities for 2025. And there's the address where you can find a copy of the report if you're so inclined to read it. The other things that come out of 2024 is we were selected our team to be part of the Our State, Our Homes program, which is a program sponsored by the UNC School of Government. That was a competitive process. We had to submit an application, and we were one of 14 teams that were chosen to participate in that 18-month program. We have a core team, and Matt is on the core team with me as well as Vice Chair Malcolm Fearing and Andy Garman from the town of Nags Head. We had our first meeting in February. It was supposed to be 2 days, but it was only 1 day because of the snow. So we crammed a lot of information into that 1 day. It was a pretty quick trip. Spent a lot of time meeting the other teams, and so we'll see how that progresses. That's an 18-month program, so that'll run through March of next year. The goal is to provide communities with resources to help better address housing, technical expertise, and so we're hoping to have some good resources coming our way and glean some good information from that program. Part of that program is that we'll be receiving $10,000 for a pilot program. I'm not sure what that is yet. We'll be determining that as we go along, but the important thing is that it's not costing Dare County or any of the stakeholders that are on the task force any money. So that's a positive thing. Plus, we're getting money. So the legal framework for housing is a very complex issue, and it's the North Carolina Constitution and the general statutes set forth how counties and towns can use their funds for housing, and even within those statutes, counties are treated differently than towns are. When they use public funds for housing, they're obligated or they're limited to only addressing certain income thresholds. Special legislation for local governments can be granted. Dare County had special legislation in 2004 that was used to construct the teacher housing there in Kill Devil Hills and in Buxton. And then there's local land use regulations also establish how what structures can be developed in different communities. The report sets out 4 components of housing that we've addressed, that we've established through our research that need to be addressed. Available housing, there needs to be a housing inventory that's available for our year-round occupancy. It needs to be attainable, meaning that folks don't need to spend more than 30% of their household income on housing, regardless of what their income is. They shouldn't be spending more than 30% of that. If they spend more than 30% of that, they're considered cost burdened. Housing needs to be sustainable. Once you get a home, you need to be able to continue to afford that. And we all are aware that increasing insurance costs and costs of repairs are affecting the sustainability of housing in Dare County. And we also have to be able to have housing that is resilient and meets, it addresses the natural hazards that we have to address here in Dare County. And then it has to be acceptable. It needs to be consistent with the local zoning that's in place. It needs to be consistent with the scale and the aesthetics of the communities. Here are some stats that we pulled together. In 2003, the median home sale price in Dare County was $325,000. In 2020, that median price jumped up to $381,500. That was a 17% increase in that time period. And then in that 4-year period from 2020 to 2024, you see that it jumped up to $622,000. So that's a 63% increase. That's a fairly big increase in a short period of time. And these are numbers that I pulled from Outer Banks Association of Realtors MLS webpage. They're reports that you can prepare there. The median household income for Dare County, and this is a 2022 number from the American Community Survey, is just shy of $80,000. And you'll see that that 30% metric that I talked about equates to just about $24,000. So there's, $80,000 and a median sales price of $622,000. Another statistic, 31% of households in Dare County are considered cost burden. I pulled some numbers together on the number of houses. We have lots of houses in Dare County. It's not a problem that we don't have the actual houses. It's how the houses are occupied and the tenure of that occupancy. There's almost 35,000 single-family homes in Dare County. 53% of those are considered vacant, and this is information that's coming from the American Community Survey. Again, that's associated with the Census Bureau, and they define vacant to include vacation or rental homes. So that's accounting for that large number of second homes and vacation rentals that we have here in Dare County. They also allow you to drill that down to the individual towns. And so for the town of Southern Shores, there's 2,348 housing units here. 48.8% of those are considered vacant and 51.2. So you guys have almost an even split there. Of those structures, 2,339 are single-family units, 9 are multifamily units, and then the occupancy, the ownership status of those occupied units, you'll see that the ownership is considerably higher than the rental number there, 1,058 versus 144. I calculated the median sales price for the various geographic areas we had that overall median sales price, but I thought it was important in the report to also break it down by geographic area, since we have membership on the task force from the various municipalities. You'll see that Southern Shores is grouped there with Martins Point, but they're very similar in their housing values and whatnot. So that's $755,000. So it's not the highest. Duck has the highest, but it is the second highest, but it's higher than the overall median income. And you'll see that the lowest there is in Collington. Collington is generally a year-round community there. I took the median sales price for Southern Shores and calculated a monthly and estimated monthly payment for what that house would be if you had a mortgage on it, a 6% mortgage, 1% insurance, and what the tax rate is for Southern Shores. And you'll see that the annual payments for that house are $70,000. And to qualify for that, you would need a household income of $251,000. Taking the annual adjusted incomes from the American Community Survey from 2022 and moving that forward with a 4% increase to get to an adjusted rate, the annual adjusted household income for Southern Shores is $121,500. And so based on that annual income, the purchase price that you could get is $363,000. So you'll see that there's a big gap there. And then I went through I've been going and doing these presentations, and so I try to make it pertinent to whatever government I'm talking to. And so I went through and looked at the MLS listings for houses here in Southern Shores, and you'll see there that the lowest one is $454,000. There's a varying range there with the 454,000, 700,000, 749, and then they went up. But there wasn't a whole lot of houses that were for sale. I don't remember the exact number, but that was the lowest one there, $454,000. And if I remember correctly, I believe that's here in the Landing, and it's not on a traditional size lot. So that jump in price there is accounting for the fact that it's not on a traditional size lot. So I also took a calculation of a 1.5 per year growth rate and a 3.5 per year growth rate of that median sales price of $755,000, just to see how the home values would increase on 5, 10, 20, and 30 years. Again, getting back to that point about the sustainability of our housing, and once you get in your house, yeah, it's a positive thing when your home value increases, but that also has the other consequences. You have to have the insurance that's consistent with that. And with homeowners rates going up, they'll be going up in June. The base rate is going to be $3,056 for $200,000 worth of coverage. And, that's going to be more for the residents of Southern Shores because the home values are here more. So, the higher the home value, the higher insurance. And so it affects that sustainability there. Getting back to the household incomes, and so we included information in the report, and again, I've tried to make this pertinent to the town of Southern Shores. You'll see the salary there for a first-year teacher from the Board of Education is right at $47,000. I pulled some information that the town provided me from your for your first-year police officers, your admin, and then your exempt range there. So they're well below that median income there, and they're certainly not going to qualify for that median price of $755,000. And then there's some private sector salary information there too. The report talks about housing options and how they can be used to increase the housing stock and what's acceptable in various communities. Accessory dwelling units. I know that, the town has had discussions about that, and they've recognized that there's a problem with private covenants, and that's the case in a lot of communities. Some Dare County communities do allow accessory dwelling units, but again, the covenant issue is still there regardless of what the community is. Duplexes and small scale housing, what we've determined and what we've heard from the community is that, there's not an appetite for a large scale development in Dare County, that folks prefer smaller scale housing in terms of architecture, and that it has to be consistent with the existing neighborhood patterns. Workforce housing at commercial sites is one option that's discussed in the report. That's the second floor occupancy of residential over commercial. And then a couple of the other local governments allow accessory structures at commercial sites similar to the concept of the accessory dwelling unit. And then the one thing that we've also discussed in the report is the usefulness of deed restrictions, trying to ensure that the housing that's set aside for year-round occupancy remains for that purpose, and that it's not transitioned to short-term rentals, and you do so by using a deed restriction to restrict it to long-term occupancy, 90 days. I think Kill Double Hills has their ADU requirement, has a 12-month requirement. Some other places also use that. The town of Nags Head recently adopted a multifamily ordinance, and they have not only the long-term tenure for occupancy, but they also have an employment requirement in there. Some of the other report findings, it's not an easy or a quick thing to fix. The options need to be evaluated and require some time to implement. Workable options will vary by community. Our continued robust economy relies on a sufficient workforce in both the public and the private sector. All sectors are affected by the housing issue due to a lack of housing stock that's not keeping up with the demand. Local governments are limited in their abilities to regulate short-term rentals. We're unable to offer tax reductions or exemptions on property taxes. We don't have the authority, or none of the local governments in Dare County have the authority to do that. You have to be granted that authority from North Carolina General Assembly. And what we've heard from property managers that we spoke to is that there is a decreased demand for short-term rentals in some areas, and that's in some of those short-term rentals in the west side areas that aren't on the waterfront or the ocean front, that they're transitioning to long-term rentals. Funding from the private and public sectors will be needed to address the general housing needs of Dare County. Some of the tasks that are set forth in the report: further research into additional housing for local government employees under the 2004 legislation that was adopted for the Board of Education. This legislation contemplates a third site on Roanoke Island in the mainland, in addition to the existing sites in Kill Double Hills and Buxton. Those are integrated into the neighborhoods, and they're well received by the communities there. So we think, that's the low-hanging fruit. It's easier to get to, so that's worthy of additional investigation. Investigate development of housing on government-owned land. If you have the land costs taken care of, that adds to the affordability of the housing and decreased costs for the construction. Government land for teaching housing was used previously, and this option will be explored again on Roanoke Island. Investigate the establishment of a nonprofit agency and perpetual funding sources that can be used for a nonprofit although there are other valuable nonprofits in Dare County, the idea of a nonprofit with a sole focus on housing for generational needs is what one of the primary recommendations from the report. Some of the outreach activities that are ongoing, the East Carolina University, there's a couple of professors that are doing a study on workforce attitudes in the community attitudes toward workforce housing. They had an open house last week in Kitty Hawk and one in Nags Head. They have 2 scheduled on Roanoke Island on Thursday, and then in the latter part of the month, they have 2 on Hatteras Island. There's also an online survey that they started last week. I think the link to those have all been, so I sent the link to the county, and I think they distributed it to the town. If not, I can certainly provide that. I encourage everyone to take that. I mean, all information is good information. We're participating with the East Carolina study in that they're going to share the results with us. I helped set up the meetings, and we've had some conversations with them. They will be the primary people developing the report. We're not influencing the results of that report. They'll just be sharing those with us. They have conducted some stakeholder interviews, and then there'll be other outreach activities that occur as the year goes on. We did receive a grant from the OBAR, secured a $3,000 grant that will help us with some of the other outreach activities. We plan to develop a toolkit of house plans that hopefully some of the local governments will use, as well as some information on first-time home buyer programs and things like that. And that's just something else there about the survey. There's the link there to the survey and a copy of the posters that they set up at the open houses. And so if you haven't taken the survey, take the time to do the survey. It takes about 5 minutes. And the survey's open until April the 1st, I think. So that's it. I'll stop right there. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. If not, thank you again for letting me come and present to you. And thank you for your participation on the task force, Elizabeth and Matt. And looking forward to moving forward in 2025 and seeing how far we get with this.
Thanks, Don. I think Rob has a question.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned building housing on government-owned land. Since at the federal level, there is a lot of land here.
Yes, sir.
And have you explored building any of the housing on federally owned land?
We have not had those conversations with the federal government yet. There's been, I've read in the press, in the last couple of weeks about how that conversation has been talked about it under the new administration. And so we'll have to explore that, but they do own a lot of land. The federal government does. We've also identified some sites that the county owns that may hold some potential.
Okay.
And so that's one of those things that we're going to work on some more.
Thank you.
Can you email this presentation to us?
Sure.
Well, you
Yeah,
got
they
it.
have it. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think we got an email on the survey, right, from the county last
think.
Friday.
From the county, yeah.
Yeah, get that.
Thank you, Donna.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
taking the
Yes, ma'am.
time. And it was very informative presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have our staff reports. We'll start with our Deputy Town Manager, Planning Director, Wes Haskett. Good evening, Wes.
Hey, good evening, Mayor, members of council. With respect to February permits, there were a total of 52 permits issued that consisted of 13 zoning permits, 22 building permits, 15 trade permits, and 2 lot disturbance stormwater management permits. The total amount of fees that was collected by the Planning and Code Enforcement Department was $14,557.36. With respect to February code enforcement, there were 2 warning citations mailed, and both of those were solid waste ordinance violations. And with respect to our planning board, they will be holding a special meeting this month on March 19th here in the Pitt Center. The regular meeting that was previously scheduled for March 17th has been canceled. The purpose of the special meeting on March 19th is for the board to consider APA-25-01, an appeal application submitted by Anthony S. Mina to appeal the zoning administrator's decision to deny his January 6, 2025 request to subdivide the property located at 75 East Dogwood Trail. Any questions?
Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
Appreciate all you do. Next, we'll hear from our police chief, Chief Cole. Good evening, sir. Good to see you.
Evening, Mayor, members of council. The Police Department report for February 2025. As you can see, we had 1,440 calls for service for that month. You can see in the pie chart with the breakdown. Under the incidents, which were the actual crimes that were reported, we had 11. Criminal arrest, we had 2 for a total of 5 charges. Those were drug-related, and 2 of those were traffic-related where there were outstanding criminal warrants. And officers conducted 28 traffic stops in February, issued 5 written citations for a total of 8 charges, and another 19 warning citations, which totaled 20 total charges. And under the local ordinance, we had 5, which were mostly park and restricted areas, and a couple of them that failed to display, and we had 1 noise ordinance that we had to enforce. We had 1 reportable motor vehicle accident for February. Questions on that? All right. Just a couple of things I just wanted to kind of highlight. Some community policing. We actually helped. This is our newest officer, Austin Jones, who you met a couple of weeks ago or a month or so ago, helping with some of the planting. And also, we did some community policing with K9 Artie, K9 Handler, Thomas Long, Officer Long, and Austin was also available. And those pictures should be there somewhere. I got it on a thumb drive, so I hope. Yeah. All right. Anyway, they were there at the school, trust me. Anyway, a lot of the kids were there doing some petting, those types of things. We are in the process. We'll give you a date when we're ready, but we're going to have a coffee with the cop.
Good.
And that'll be over here at the Shore Roastery.
Nice.
So I'll let you know for sure when that's going to be. Any questions?
I hope those Spriggers didn't give Officer Jones in trouble.
He's a young guy. He can handle it. He had his bulletproof socks on. So.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, Chief Cole.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Next, we'll hear from our fire chief, Chief Limbacher. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The month of February for the fire department, pretty simple report again this time of year, but one potential electrocution, and that came from Brightspeed hitting a line on Hawley, which I know you're all surprised that Brightspeed hit something, but anyway, one of our address sign in the program, 1 assist government agency, 3 alarms, 1 special incident, 2 structure fires this month, 4 canceled en route, 6 cover up or standby, 36 EMS calls for a total of 55 calls this month. And that compares, we're one ahead of last year. So, I mean, they go up and down, but does anyone have any questions on that? It's pretty simple this month. But I did just want to touch upon, we had, which is, when it's notable, I do like to talk about some things because this is kind of unusual for us having actually 3. I'm only going to talk about 2 today, 2 structure fires this month. And it's funny because we didn't have not 1 structure fire in town the whole year of 24, and already we've had 3 here. So I hope that's not an indication of how we're going to proceed this year. But anyway, the first one was, I'm not going to give the addresses, but this is the front of the house. If you want to click through, Sheila, I'll just talk a little bit about it. And I will say it started at a generator. I'm not going to give the exact cause because it's still under investigation, but did start at a generator. And I will tell you that Sergeant Simpson and I go back, Sheila, real quick, knocked the bulk of that fire down, which stopped it from getting into the eaves prior to the first 1 3/4 inch line being in play. And, if you've ever seen, you're probably not aware that most of our chief's vehicles are outlaid as like a battalion chief in the city. So we have a lot more equipment on it. And this is kind of the reason why. I actually have 2 water cans in there, and Chris did an awesome job. So between the two of us, we knocked a lot of it back. And once, the first line got in play, the fire was out fairly quickly. But if you go to the next picture, what happened was it was all crawling on the crawl space. So it burned up just about everything. Everything under there was glowing orange when the first line was put in play. If you want to go to the next one, Sheila. And you can see it had been burning for quite a while because you got some hard alligator burning in there and things like that. So go ahead, Sheila. And it's just saying the same thing where the point of origin is. And again, these 2 fires are kind of the same, but this one is particularly dangerous because if, at night, it's just harder to see, obviously. And when you're sending a crew interior, that's what they're standing on. So you always need to keep that in mind when you're sending a crew interior that, the floor could be spongy and possibly give way on them. So the next one was last Sunday night, a little after midnight. The first one was a little after, I think it was 12:44 in the afternoon. This was 2 minutes after midnight last Monday morning. And this one here was particularly long lay. It was 400 feet to the house off the street. So no one would have even noticed this if this one was an elderly lady, woke up to the smell of smoke in her house and no working smoke detectors in the house. So I did want to say, look, please, if you have a problem with your smoke detectors in Southern Shores, you can call us. We will help you. This is exactly the people we want to help because I'd rather go there and do this than have you fall off a ladder and things like that. So this is just showing when we got up there, the first floor had a light haze in it, but this door led into the crawl space. And when one of our guys popped that, it was banked all the way to the floor. And those, again, are particularly dangerous because you don't know what construction is down here. These are newer houses typically, and a lot of times have lighter construction, and that presents its own challenge in itself. And I think Councilman Neal could probably speak to that the best, how its integrity as built is one thing, but when you take something away, engineered lumber, it definitely fails a lot quicker. This is just the point of origin, and this was a service disconnect. Again, not a whole lot of fire here, but this is directly underneath this one bedroom where she was sleeping. So luckily she was a light sleeper and woke to the smoke, and we were able to get her.
Disconnect?
What's that?
That was a service disconnect?
Mm-hmm. That V pattern right there, where the wires are, is actually right where it was bolted to. So, again, I'm not going to go into the whole investigation. It's pretty much complete, but just so extremely lucky. I mean, if she had not woke up, and when you're elderly, typically your senses get dulled quicker. If she wouldn't have woke up, no one would have noticed. It was 400 feet off the ground. It's a little after midnight. Even the police driving around at this time, it's cold out. Someone could be having a fire at the fireplace. It wouldn't be unusual to maybe smell a little smoke, and you wouldn't really notice it until you saw the orange glow, which obviously would be a terrible thing. So please, if you need help with these smoke detectors, this is actually where it burned a little bit through on the floor. Most of that flooring was taken up by my guys just to make sure there was no extension into the home, but it burned just a touch into the house. It was maybe another minute or two, it would have been in the house, and then we would have had a real problem. So just everyone did a great job on both these. Everybody worked good, our mutual aid partners, just like it's exactly like it's supposed to. So anybody have any questions?
Appreciate you sharing that, Chief, especially about smoke alarms. They're really, people don't need to take those things for granted. So
And this woman in particular is the exact person we love to help, because when, she actually didn't want to disturb us because we were sleeping and things. And I'm appreciative of that normally, but not when you have something serious like this going on. So.
thank you very much, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
All right.
Appreciate all y'all do,
Thank you.
keeping us safe. Next, we'll hear from our town manager, Cliff Ogburn. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start off with some news from yesterday. Dare County released the results of the 2025 countywide reval of real property. And as you know, North Carolina law requires all counties to reappraise or revalue real property at least once every 8 years. Dare County went through this in 2020 and again in 2013. And the purpose of the reval is to establish equity among all properties and to equalize the tax burden among all classes of property. Reval ensures property owners are paying their fair share of taxes services by local government. So by the end of the month, we're all going to get a new tax bill. And as a whole, the town of Southern Shores and the town of Duck saw the greatest increase in property value at 74%. And that doesn't mean everybody's house's value is going to go up by that amount, and your taxes are not going to go up by that amount either. And the reason for that, as part of the process, all units of local government are required to publish the revenue neutral rate. Statute defines it as revenue neutral rate as the rate that is estimated to produce revenue for the fiscal year equal to the revenue that would have been produced for the next fiscal year by the current tax rate if no reval had occurred. And so on this slide, I tried to illustrate and just pick numbers. If before reval, the town had a property value of $2 billion and a tax rate of 22 cents, then we would have generated $4,400,000. So in a case like ours, where we saw a 74% increase, which is almost $1.5 billion based on this, this is some town USA. So they would have seen that value go up by almost $1.5 million. And in order to generate the same $4,400,000, the tax rate would drop to 12.6 cents. Another reason for doing that is it would be really hard for the taxpayer to know if their taxes were raised. If the council of that town set a tax rate of 14 cents, some would think, oh, great, the taxes went down 8 cents, but they really didn't. It went up 2 cents. So it's not that simple. It's nothing in local government is. The North Carolina Department of Revenue requires us to submit a form called a TR2. That's what the TR2 looks like before we fill it out. I'm not going to go through that, but it takes things into consideration like growth. It takes things into consideration like you can, after you have a reval, you can guesstimate, I guess, that a certain amount of those values are going to be challenged. So whatever value we had could go down by those challenges. And so one of the things you have to do when you do the revenue neutral rate, you have, like I said, determine a rate that would produce revenues equal to those produced for the current fiscal year. So what I tried to do here was I took a house, two different, just a house that in 2019, the value would have been, oh, no, wait a minute, let me back up. This is actually what happened in 2019 and 2020 for this particular house. A house that was valued in 2019 at $1,300,000, excuse me. That's the total value. I've been playing with this all day long and I've confused myself. But 2019, the value of property in the town of Southern Shores was $1,314,000,000. That reval, we saw an increase of 20%. And so that went up to almost 1.6 billion. And so in 2019, the tax value was, the tax rate was 22 cents. And in 2020, it dropped to 19.58. And that doesn't include the 4 cents for beach nourishment. That's kind of a separate. So I wanted to show, this is where I show two different houses. If you look, and this goes back to 2013, if you look at the value of the house at the top of $781,000 in 2013, that value went up to $932,000, which you can see the difference in the taxes from one year to the next. Revenue neutral doesn't mean you're going to pay that same $1,719 the next year. That house's increase was 16.18%, so their taxes went up. And so if you look at a house, $428,000 that went up to $453,000, the same math that generates the revenue neutral rate, those property owners would have seen a decrease in their value. So it's really tricky. And it gets confusing when when we talk about the revenue neutral rate, because there's so many variables and things that can change it. But essentially what it means is we're going to publish with our budget what the revenue neutral rate is, meaning the same tax rate that we would have applied last year to get the same amount of revenue. And all of this will come to people's doorsteps by the end of March. And it's, like I said, it's 74% is a lot of increase. And it makes everything Donna said even more difficult. So any questions?
You're going to publish it for Southern Shores with the tax bill that'll come from the county? It wasn't
No.
quite following your.
It'll be in our budget
Announce
ordinance.
it, Yeah.
In our budget ordinance, it'll show, and that it gets kind of, when you go on the county website, it'll show the total tax people pay for the county and the town. I just pulled out the town's amount. But in our budget ordinance, and when I do the manager's presentation, I'll have to share what that rate would have been.
Does the county do the same thing? for the
Yes,
whole county
every
too,
unit
right?
of local government's
Revenue
required to
neutral?
do that.
And will we do something specific on the town website to let people know kind of what the steps are in this?
Yes, ma'am. We'll do that. Okay, let's see, is the next one. Should we pull up the next one? The other thing I wanted to talk about was the milfoil. We got the results of the milfoil study today. I've given you those, the survey results. We'll put that on the website and share that with folks. But I just wanted to hit on a few things in the report. And I'll skip over the introduction and the methodology, except to say the way they went about determining how much milfoil we had was different in the creek than it was in the canal. In the creek, they used something called a point intercept method. It took 13 points were sampled. There's 12 figures in this to illustrate all of it. But in the actual canals, they use a rake to determine it. And they had, they found milfoil at 26 of the 53 spots they surveyed, or 49%. They found Eurasian water milfoil was the most abundant species. They also found Phragmites and wedging grass. But milfoil accounted for 80% of that vegetation that was found. The estimated coverage of Eurasian water milfoil is 6 acres, and Phragmites was the other document. It was found in both places, at the creek and in the canals. And so what all this means is they don't really come to a conclusion of should we treat or should we not, but based on their experience and based on what was found, they're advising that we're in the work program. They've got $20,000 set aside for the town of Southern Shores if we were to need to treat. Doesn't mean we have to, but and it would require a $10,000 match on our part. But we're being in the work plan, they'll also continue to survey, and that y'all just got this today, and so I just we'll share it, maybe bring it back up at another meeting. But based on this, it doesn't appear that we need to treat. We just need to continue to monitor what we got. And now you can see, we'll put this on the website so other folks can see it, but this is the area they surveyed in the creek. And then that's, of course, the area they surveyed in the canal.
That's what we're responsible for, not the creek.
Right, that's right.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. So any questions on that?
So we know we have some citizens who really have been concerned about this. Can we make copies of this available for them to pick up, hard copies?
Yep. I will send Tommy Carroll one before I
Thank you.
leave tonight, amongst others that want to see this. Let's see, the next, if you go to the next, the bridge, that's okay. So they've got the, both concrete walls have been, these pictures aren't the greatest, so I apologize, but you can, do I scan this way? or you can see this is taken right in the middle of the canal. Now on the left, you can see that's the wall that the H-piles will go behind. On the other side, they finished that today as well. So you can see they pulled the plastic off. And so they're now ready in a state today to start to put the H-piles in. Tomorrow, they're probably not going to do much because of the weather. They may start driving the H-piles, but they definitely will on Thursday. And what they take 2 H-piles as tests to determine how many times they'll hit this with a hammer, not a vibratory. And so they have to calculate how many times it takes, how many hits it takes to move it a foot. And if whatever that is, if they deviate from that, they have to change or, do something different. But they have to establish that standard. And thankfully those 2 will stay when they go in. So again, this is just, you can see the slab, the H-piles will support the slabs for the bridge. They won't be that much higher than the concrete is, but you can see the exposed sheet pile there. That's taken on the north side of the bridge. And I think that's it. As of right now, they're on schedule. They're moving along. The H-piles it won't be as bad as, I think I told you, it won't be as bad as the noise and the vibration from the sheet piles. Shouldn't take as long either. They got 7 they have to put on each side, and hopefully that'll go fairly fast.
Very good.
Was that what they were delivering by transport this week?
Yes, sir.
Backing down Juniper? Okay.
Do you remember how deep they're driving those?
They're different, varying, but as deep as 40 feet. I think that's the deepest, but
When are they going to start driving?
when? If the weather allows, they may start tomorrow, but I think definitely on Thursday.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Look forward to having a bridge there someday soon. Especially the people whose lives are depending on the detour now. Next, we have the opportunity to hear from our town attorney, Philip. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I have nothing to report, which you always want to hear from your lawyer.
We appreciate you being here with us. Did anyone sign up for public comment? No one has signed up. We have no old business.
Actually, there is public comment.
Oh,
I have
public
to
comment
read.
that our
Yes.
attorney has to be
Yes,
read
it's
into the
actually- Yeah,
record.
it's not my comment, but.
Yes, sorry. Thank
This
you.
is public comment from Anthony S. Mina, who you all are aware has been banned for at least a year from town property. But he still has the First Amendment right to speak, and so I will read his email to you. Dear Town Council, I regret to inform you that Wes Haskett has caused the town of Southern Shores to be in contempt of a Dare County Superior Court order requiring a complete copy of the October 21st, 2024 variance hearing to be provided to the court within 30 days of December 18th, 2024. A copy of the order Wes Haskett has refused to comply with is found at www.savesouthernshores.com. Also regret to inform you that Wes Haskett, Attorney Lauren Womble, and Attorney Jay Willis are guilty of disorderly conduct under Town Code Section 22-1, which states any person who shall do or engage in any of the following shall be guilty of disorderly conduct. Paragraph 8, frequent any public place and obtain money from another, an illegal and fraudulent scheme, trick, artifice, or device or attempt to do so. At the October 21st, 2024 variance hearing, Lauren Womble, Jay Willis, and Wes Haskett were all misrepresenting Town Code 36-414B, which requires posted notice at affected properties when there is a zoning amendment in addition to the strictures of Town Code 36-414A. The rules of professional conduct prohibit attorneys from aiding fraudulent transaction and misrepresenting laws. Embezzlement laws prohibit Southern Shores town money from being spent on attorneys misrepresenting laws and codes, and also prohibit town money from being spent on attorneys hiding misconduct. This town money has been spent since June of 2023 regarding Wes Haskett's March 31st, 2023 zoning amendment application. The town ethics policy only allows town money to be spent in the best interest of all Southern Shores taxpayers. As such, I respectfully request the town council immediately terminate Wes Haskett and Cliff Ockford's employment with the town of Southern Shores for embezzling town money to pay attorneys to misrepresent Town Code 36-414B, Town Code 36-414B was misrepresented at the October 21st, 2024 variance hearing, which is on youtube.com. Please also request the Dare County District Attorney's Office to arrest Wes Askett and Cliff Oxburn on corruption charges for engaging in the witness intimidation schemes documented on the www.safesouthernshores.com website. Thank you, Anthony S.
Thank you, Philip. No other further public comment. We'll move on to new business. So the first item would be letter for the bridge. Paul?
Okay, last Thursday, Cliff and I attended a meeting in Currituck that was held by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, and this was over whether or not to issue a water quality permit to allow construction of the Mid-Currituck Bridge. The meeting was held because there was an objection to issuing that permit. Wes and I, there were about 75 people there. Cliff and I were the only two speakers out of 17 that spoke in favor of issuing the permit. Obviously, construction of the Mid-Currituck Bridge has been a big priority for Southern Shores and for Dare County. And our citizens are really very hopeful that this bridge will get built. So I issued a statement in favor. Cliff issued a statement in favor. I know that a number of residents here in Southern Shores have written emails to the department this week expressing their support for the bridge. So I'd like for the town council to issue a statement in support of issuing the water quality permit.
Yes, and thank you to both Cliff and Paula for attending that meeting and submitting oral comments in favor of the water quality permit being issued to allow for the construction of the bridge. Council, I'm in favor of us putting together a letter and submitting comments to the Division of Water Quality in favor of issuing the permit. Can we just get to consensus and say we're good with that?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yep.
I'd be happy to help write it.
Okay, so we will put that together and meet I believe it's a March 31 deadline for written comments. We have something on the website to allow people to find where, we'll make that known as of tonight.
And I would encourage anybody in the room anybody listening to this or watching it on YouTube to issue just a quick email to the department asking them to issue that permit.
If you have any questions, don't know where to send the email, whatever, you can get up with the town, either on the website or call the office tomorrow. We'll let you know how to do that. I did mine today. And Paula has been extremely active getting all of her email lists and friends with email lists to get people to submit written comments. So yes, please do it. Thanks very much. Okay, I think we're good on that. Next, I would like to call Wes to come up and talk to us about our regional hazard mitigation plan update.
Thank you and good evening again, Mayor and members of council. For the past about year or so, I've been updating you all periodically about our effort to update the Outer Banks Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan. So tonight, I'm coming to you all asking for adoption of it. The consulting firm that assisted all the municipalities in the county with adopting or putting the plan together and getting us to this point assisted us, and they've requested that we ask each jurisdiction to adopt the plan, or it's more of an update rather. And that would be through a resolution that was included in your packets. But just with some background information, in April 2024, work began on updating the plan, which includes Currituck County, Dare County, and all of the municipalities. And that was with the assistance of the WSP consulting firm. The town was represented on a committee, Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee, The committee members representing Southern Shores were Planning Board Chairperson Andy Ward, Planning Board Vice Chairperson Tony DiBernardo, David Bradley, Public Works Director, and myself with the Planning Department. Local governments are required to have an updated or an adopted hazard mitigation plan in order to be eligible for federal and state grant funding and disaster assistance, and they must be updated every 5 years. The main purpose of a hazard mitigation plan is to reduce vulnerability to disasters. Hazard mitigation plans also enable local governments to gain points in the Community Rating System program, which results in lower flood insurance rates for property owners. The town's currently adopted hazard mitigation plan, which is the Outer Banks Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan, was adopted in August 2020. So that's why we're coming to you all now to make sure we're on that 5-year cycle so we keep it current. You all did not receive a hard copy of the document in your packets because the document is a total of 709 pages. The pages that specifically address the town of Southern Shores can be found on pages 526 to 546. I will call out on those pages, the bulk or the meat of that, in my opinion, are the mitigation strategies that we have that we can implement. There are 21 mitigation strategies in this update. 14 of those are carried forward from the plan that's currently in effect that was adopted in August of 2020. Of those, or 7 of those are new mitigation strategies, and 3 of those are stormwater related, 2 are flood related, 1 is wildfire related, and 1 is beach renourishment related. So that's all I have for you all on this. If you have any questions, I can try to answer them. There's a lot of information in there. So I can try to answer any questions you might have.
Well, I can't wait to read 709 pages.
Yes,
No,
ma'am.
I'm just kidding. I'll certainly, but this website link that you have in our packet, we can find our way to the 20 pages that refer to Southern Shores.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Pages 526 to 546 would be the pages that
Got it.
specifically address Southern Shores. Southern Shores is addressed throughout the plan, but it's addressed with other communities and tables and other information. But those pages are specifically tailored to Southern Shores that address mitigation strategies, maps, previous flood data, wildfire data, information related to those topics.
Very good.
Is there something in terms of mitigation that is recommended that we're not doing that we need to work on?
Not necessarily. I mean, I would say in the mitigation strategies, those are the things that we focus on. They're not necessarily recommendations. As the representatives from the town that served on the committee, we were pretty much able to pick out and choose which mitigation strategies we wanted to carry forward and which ones we wanted to put in to add. But you, in order to not necessarily gain points, but in order for your hazard mitigation plan to be the most effective, you have to cover so many topics, like such as flood, wildfire, earthquake, information technology related, things of that nature. But there aren't necessarily recommendations.
Well, wildfires have been in the news a lot lately. So.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Indeed.
So how many were common among all the municipalities?
I'm sorry?
How many of the proposals were common among the municipalities?
Mitigation strategies?
Yeah, the strategies. I mean, any.
I'm not sure.
So this is
I
kind of
can't speak to
passive
the
or
other,
regulated?
I can't speak to the other communities. I'm not sure how many they had.
I'm just curious what was in the report. I mean, all of them would be in there, all the ones.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
proposed,
Each,
right?
yeah, out of the 709 pages, each community has their own section and it's in this, they're found in an appendix. But I don't know, I can't speak to how many each one
Some of them
has.
would have to be common in order to work together if there was a huge issue.
I do know that there are some in common, like Duck and Kitty Hawk have Mid-Currituck Bridge related mitigation strategies, which we do as well, like continue to support the Mid-Currituck Bridge like you all have done tonight. Duck and Kitty Hawk, they have mitigation strategies to that effect. I think we all have beach nourishment or beach renourishment strategies that are very similar as well.
Okay, good. There's concert.
There's that. And then another one that comes to mind is probably the local elevation standard that we have, that all the communities have.
Okay.
Well, I'd just like to personally thank staff as well as our planning board chair, Andy Ward, and vice chair, Tony DiBernardo, for participating. So thank you for doing that for
Yes,
the
ma'am.
town. We appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So we need a motion to adopt the approval of the resolution 2025-03-02.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you,
Thank you
Wes.
all.
We
Thank you.
appreciate it. I'm going to call on Cliff to introduce our next speaker.
So every so often, Chief Limbacher will send a letter. This one was dated March 14th, 2023, and it says, it starts off in bold letters. Did you know the Southern Shores Fire Department is a volunteer system, and without enough volunteers, we will have to add career staff and your taxes will increase. It's another reason for the revenue neutral thing being up there. So the chief goes on to say, I mean, it's a two-part goal that he has in writing these letters. One is to let folks know that the vulnerability, he does it to try and gain volunteers. But in our contract, it talks about the services and the great services that we've gotten, and you saw some of that tonight. But it also talks about, as he says in here, sounding the alarm. And back in November, I think he kind of made it maybe a 2-alarm and said it was time, that we really need to start thinking seriously, looking in the near future what we were going to do as far as transition into a paid department. And so you all decided that we needed to get a consultant on board. We did exactly that. We've got Greg Grayson with North Carolina Chiefs Consulting. He's got 38 years of experience. He has degrees and certifications that if you put them all together, I think he'd be the only name on the list. And so he's got a lot of chiefs that ex-chiefs, retired chiefs that work with him on this. And so we're getting an independent review on kind of where we are and some of the decisions we may need to make going forward. So, Mr. Grayson.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Welcome, sir. We're
Thank
glad
you
you're
so
here.
very- Thank you so very much, and thank you for having me tonight. Certainly a pleasure to be here and meet you in person. So
Up and down operated.
excellent, excellent. Thank you. And I should begin with some thank yous to you for participating in this process. I want to give a thank you to your firefighters. They have been very good participants with this, very engaged, involved. Appreciation to your chief, fire chief, as well as your manager. We had lots of data we requested, and your staff was very responsive to that in a relatively short turnaround time. So we want to give a lot of thank you. And thank you to you just sincerely for the service you give to your community. Fire protection is one of those issues that is a core, essential part of local government here in North Carolina. And we're going to talk through some of the observations that we saw and things that we found in our review, and step through some of that here with you tonight. So we do serve as the League of Municipalities preferred fire consulting provider, sole provider actually, as well as we contract with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. So they have to vet our work. They look at what we do, they monitor what we perform and the quality of work that we do. And we assist in many areas, some such as this, but really any area that a municipality or a county is having challenges. I've actually have 9 presentations in 8 days between this week and last week. So we're out there quite a bit, and we work across the entire state. I was in the mountains last night. I'm here today, and I'm going to be in the mountains tomorrow. So we travel the state, but we really work and collaborate with both the association and the league in this effort that we do. And we do that through a great team of people. As the manager said, we have a very strong team. We have about 25 folks throughout the state. These are just some of our core members, and some of them do work with us and on a regular basis, and we pull other folks in as needed. We have helped a number of municipalities and counties across the state. We keep a number of projects moving at any time. But when you ask someone like us to come in and help you with this review, you're looking for a third party independent. Those are important words to help describe what we do. We simply are there to see what are the facts, what does the data say, what's the compare and contrast across the state. One of the positive things that our team does, we only focus on North Carolina. And so, there are, while you think things may be very unique to here to Southern Shores, there are comparable models. And certainly coastal, but they're comparable models to look at best practices in the Piedmont and mountains as well. So, we're here to look at the data, look at the information, but our goal is to provide you a better service delivery system at the end of the day. And so that's our intent and goal in this work. For the work that we did with you, we listened to stakeholders. You as the elected officials were one of those groups. We listened to firefighters. The chief was able to align a number of folks to come by and see us. We actually had one-on-one, person by person. We spent quite a bit of time doing that. They gave great feedback and review. But we took that another step because we couldn't talk to everybody. So we wanted to give everyone an opportunity. And so we did a survey based upon the responses that we had initially. We did a survey so for inclusiveness of everyone and have that type of feedback so that we give everyone an opportunity to hear from them. We also did some work with just very basic work with GIS. Some of our projects are very deep with GIS, but we just wanted to look at how that coverage relative to insurance ratings and coverage looked, and if anything was challenging that. But we did quite a bit of work with the response analysis. One of the best predictors of your future responses is your past responses. So we looked at a number of your responses. You have a really strong system that the fire department is using. There are obviously a number of providers out there that provide that, but this one you use, we work with a lot. And so we have Chief Tuttle as my expert in that, and he knows how to drive that very, very well. So he collects that data, processes the data, and produces observations and recommendations from that. So we did quite a bit of work with your response analysis. We collected quite a bit of financial information. Your chief provided multiple years of audits that were very thorough, very well completed. You have been filing 990 reports every year. That's something that private nonprofits organizations have to do. You'd think that would always be the case, but I can tell you that's not. And so you were really in good shape with that. We looked at your 990 forms, your audits, your informational sheets. Chief Camposano with our team has the most experience in working with this. And so he developed some financial fiscal analysis and review of all those pieces. And then collectively, our team comes together, not only the folks involved with it, but I pulled some other folks in too. For example, someone who is currently a combination fire chief, pulled him into that equation and let him review the data, who hasn't been, working with it day to day. And we construct some observations and recommendations for you. I want to go through 3 points with you tonight. This is always an opportunity I love learning, and hopefully you do too. Just learning about the fire service a little bit more and some things that I think are very appropriate to your situation here in Southern Shores. The first point I would say to you is time is really critical in services that your fire department provides. You saw some pictures tonight. You see how something really small can turn large in a hurry. So time is very important. It's really one of those cornerstones that we look at fire departments and their performance and what is happening with time. That's why time is so important. And so my first point I want to talk to you about is a little bit about with time tonight. And so if your homeowner who called that call in that you showed the pictures of here tonight smelled some smoke, if it was Miss Smith, her interest is going to be, okay, I need help. I'm dialing 911. When does the fire department arrive? They may not realize there's many pieces of that equation. The 911 call has to be answered and processed and the call dispatched. The fire department has to be alerted. If in your system with volunteers, folks have to respond to the station. In most cases, get the fire engine, then be ready to turn the wheels and turn towards the location. And then there's this piece called travel time. It depends on how long it takes them to go from where they are to wherever the incident is. So again, Ms. Smith's interested in, okay, I need help. How long does it take to get here? But that's really, to her, that's the red line you see there, that total response time. How long does it take? Same thing in a medical emergency. I'm having my husband's collapsed. I don't know what's wrong with him. I need help. The same type of thing. They're interested, your residents are very interested in how long it takes to get help because it's the worst time of their life. They need help and they need it right then. So, but there are pieces to that, and we break that down. We look at each component. What is the alarm processing time? What's the turnout time? What's the travel time? We look at each of those because each have a level of importance. Just a couple things to show that is in a cardiac situation, this is on empirical data. This is not North Carolina specific. This is more national. But if someone's having a cardiac event and a trained person can be there immediately with a defibrillator maybe and begin treatment, their chance of survival is very, very good, upper 90%. But with every minute that passes, the chance of survivability drops. Okay, so again, time being really, really important. So in medical crisis, it's obviously important, but it also is in fire, as you saw in your pictures tonight. Fire moves very quickly, spreads very quickly. And so, if you're to have an impact on saving someone who might be in a structure, that's a limited window. And the same piece, if you're going to be able to help someone who is having a fire situation, minimize damage to a structure, that too has a limited window. So I've got several graphs and charts, but again, we're not here to go through those details. You'll have a detailed report with this, but I want to hit the highlights of each of these. So your department has demonstrated their ability to put a first unit on the scene for a building fire in 8 minutes, 33 seconds or less on 80% of the events and have an average of 12.43 firefighters per incident. The last piece of this, in addition, your first alarm units arrive within 38 minutes, 16 seconds or less. So that's a lot of numbers. But what that's saying, we're going to look at some of the standards that's based upon, is your fire department's providing, based on all of the review that we have done, your fire department's providing a very strong level of service for a volunteer department serving a suburban-based community. Your level of service is very appropriate for that. And I want to be able to show you some of that here today. But when we look at this bar graph over on the left-hand side, that's just simply the number of incidents for each year that we were able to look at and review. And so the orange line showing some percentage changes. But we're able to look at all these pieces. That's this chart over on the right. It's just simply a way to look at all those pieces. Turnout time, response time, travel time, all those terms, they all roll together a little bit. So we break it out and show some of that. But, if you were asked by one of your constituents, well, what level of service does our fire department provide? That's the official answer for that. Okay, probably have to give you that on a card to read it out because it's fairly convoluted, but hopefully can show you a way that's a little bit simpler to explain it here in just a moment. So we do, again, break each of those pieces out. The bar graph on the far left is showing the turnout time, and that's the time from the time the firefighters receive the alarm until wheels are turning on the truck. The bar graph on the right-hand side shows the travel time, and this again is looked at by each year, so there's variances obviously in that, but it shows you those two pieces, and then the bottom one's really what Ms. Smith's interested in. What's my total response time look like? Okay. So we again break each of those pieces out, look at them one by one. In this case, one of the positives I would say to you, so many different communities, the responses during COVID just were so different than what we normally have seen. Your data that we're able to look at was before, during, and after, and that makes a better data set. So let me say to you, sometimes we have had to look at something that's very limited, but you have good data 2018 all the way through the end of 2023. So that, that's the ability that we had to look at all that. Most of that was before the end of the year, so we were able to look through the 23 data. So this hopefully will tie a little bit of this together for you. There are no laws or requirements about what a level of service has to be. That there is no state statute, federal statute, or other that says, well, here's the level of service that the fire department has to provide. What there is one piece that is statutory and required, and that is before firefighters can go into a burning structure, they have to have a rescue team assembled. The terminology that we use for that is 2 in, 2 out, meaning before 2 people can go into the structure, there has to be someone there to get them out in case something goes wrong. So that requires at least 4 people before your firefighters can make entry into a structure. A structure on fire is known as an immediately dangerous to life and health environment. And so it falls under OSHA and the OSHA requirements. Now, there's a couple exceptions to that, primarily being if you have a known rescue situation, that doesn't apply, but you have to document that. So most cases, you've got to assemble at least 4 people before you can make an interior. You may be able to do what the chief and one of the police officers were able to do. They were on the outside, right? They were able to knock something down. That was excellent. And his vehicles are equipped to be able to do some of that. But before you can go into a structure that is immediately dangerous to life and health, you do have to assemble a rescue team, or 2 in, 2 out. That's the chart on the right. You must do that no matter where you are in the country. The chart on the left-hand side, we compared your data against the standard for volunteer fire departments working in a suburban area. Suburban area is between 500 and 1,000. You're in the 700 to 800 range by density, number of people per square mile. So you fall within that suburban range. And we were able to look at again, the standard for a primarily volunteer fire department. There's a completely different standard for career departments. We compared you, because that's the system you're using. We compared you into this data. On the left-hand side, your information into that to see the level of service and how your department compared. And so once again, you compare well with that. And so when we look at the outcomes that we were able to take a look at, your first responding engine is able to go to a structure fire, certainly within that 10 or 14 minutes. You cover some area that's outside the municipality. So we looked at both the suburban as well as the rural. And so you're able to make that time very, very well. So your department's performing well with time. It becomes a little bit more challenging are you getting either the 6 people in a rural area or the 10 people needed, 10 firefighters needed in the suburban area? Are you able to get them there in that amount of time? It's again, time issue, not your response time's good. Are you able to get the number of people there that you need to do the work? And so that's one of the pieces that we would articulate to you here tonight. So number 1 was time. Number 2, firefighting's hard work. I've been doing this since I was 16, and probably my dad was a charter member of volunteer department. Since I was about that big, I was going with him, right? But I've been doing this a long time. I can't do what I used to be able to do. Firefighting is very hard work. Not only is it very dangerous work, many compare it to the strength and endurance that athletes need to be able to do this work. It's very demanding. Wearing gear, wearing an air pack, breathing equipment. It's physically demanding. It's exhausting, the work you're doing. It has an urgency to it. So the demands are very high. And it's really, it's very labor intensive. So we'll make that point here as number 2 today. And there's a lot of information here, but I want to try to show some of your workload pieces for Southern Shores. Your peak time period of calls is the 12-hour peak is between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Your 8-hour peak is 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Okay, so probably not real surprising, but we chart that on this chart to the left, and the warmer colors represent more calls or more incidents. The cooler colors, the greens and light yellows, those represent fewer calls. So this kind of helps you see by day of the week and also time of day. Well, when does most of the workload occur? Okay, and so that's what that is showing. This chart on the right-hand side is showing the number of firefighters you had on each of your particular response units responding to those incidents. And you'll see that the number of the people that you have responding is rather consistent. These are broken out by colors, and you can see the colors over on the far right: truck 12, engine 12, command 12, whichever units those may be. And you'll be able to see how the numbers of people responding is fairly consistent all the way back to 2018. But the piece that is a concern for you, as most communities across North Carolina, is weekdays. That's when you have a higher call volume during that period of time, but it's also a time that volunteers aren't as available because they're at work. They're not available. For those people that are still in the workforce, things have changed a whole lot since 1982. When people many times were allowed to leave work in a volunteer community. That's just not the case. And the travel time for people today is much different than it was, many, many years ago. So we are seeing across our entire state that changes in the dynamics of volunteerism. It's not a Southern Shores thing. It's not a Dare County thing. It's not even a North Carolina thing. It's a national challenge. And most of those 9 groups I'm speaking to in 8 days, every one of those has a segment about changes in volunteerism because it's affecting a lot of our systems and structures that we've depended upon for many years and relied on for many years. It's just a change in the dynamics. I have a 24-year-old son. I'm very proud of him. He's Master of Public Administration, works for a town government, and he's doing great in starting out his role. But that generation is very different than my generation from the volunteerism perspective. Did the best I could to raise him up, but it's a very different generation, and he's doing great. Very proud of him. But the generation that many of the volunteers would need to come from to be able to physically do much of the work are not jumping on board with being volunteers. Now, you pride yourself as a community of volunteers. I think every one of you that I talked to said that, and what a wonderful, wonderful piece. You're not the only ones we heard that from. We heard that from your firefighters. Southern Shores is a community of volunteers. And so I think you have a lot of public interest in helping and being volunteers. But being firefighters is challenging. And so we look at your data, we look at the numbers, we pulled all of Dare County's data and numbers. They too are having a loss across the county, but Southern Shores is having a higher level of loss. You're having a net loss of about 14% per year. Now, what that means is you've lost some volunteers, you brought some new ones in, but you have a net loss of about 14%. So it doesn't take long to accumulate that. At the state level, I need to put that in context for you, that at the state level, the average annual loss is about 3.5%. Use the word again, net loss. With new people coming in, more people going out and coming in. If you think about 2 doors, there's a lot more people going on the outdoor than the indoor, right? But 3.5%. In 2024, we just got these numbers last week. 2024, the state average actually dropped down to 2.5%. But still, when you look all the way back to 2018, it still comes to 3.5%. Okay, so some potentially positive news, but you have some aggravating causes and factors that your number's a little higher than the state average, much of which you saw earlier tonight. You saw some data and demographics earlier tonight about the cost of your housing, the cost of living in Southern Shores. It's a beautiful community, and I know you're all very proud of it. It's my honor to get to come here and to get to see it. So, but you've got some challenges within your community of some demographics and people who are able and capable and have the desire to volunteer in this manner. You're obviously very engaging volunteers in this community, but the fire service piece, you have a larger than the state average net loss of volunteers during the time period that we look at. And the charts on the right, both are really the same, one's just showing it a little bit differently than another. Now, you have been addressing some of those particularly weekday challenges with the 3 staff that you have in the fire department. So the chief, deputy chief, and assistant chief, they work during the weekdays. They work and they're on call all the time. And so, but they're trying to be there to help that response in weekdays. And I think this chart here really says it pretty well. Your staffing heat map over on the left-hand side is when you're staffing, upstaffing, providing some staffing. But this one on the right-hand side is the demand. That's the same thing you saw a few minutes ago. So if you compare and contrast the two, yes, you're having an impact on that. But remember what I talked about earlier. Time is very important. And then the workload that it takes, the number of people that it takes to work a scene is very important as well. One of the positives that you've got that I want to make sure that you realize is your automatic aid with your neighbors. Now, to get help from your neighbors, you have to be able to give help to your neighbors, right? It's reciprocal. And so you have good help coming from your neighbors. Without your neighbors, you wouldn't be able to assemble what we call an effective firefighting force. But with your neighbors, you can. And they're able to with you. In fact, Southern Shores has more depth than some of your neighbors. They may have a 4-person crew that responds, but they don't have additional people coming. Your department is able to respond to first crew, but as more volunteers come, they're able to send additional crews. So Southern Shores actually has more depth because of your volunteers than some of your neighbors. But you have a very, very strong automatic aid agreement with those around you. Your firefighters are, they enjoy being a part of that because they help make a difference. And your outcomes are good because of your neighbors. I don't know which other departments were at those incidents that the chief showed, but he could speak to that. But they come to help you and you go to help them. And that's just the way the fire service works. And we're very dependent upon that, especially with the loss of volunteers. I have a graph over on the right-hand side that does show the age of your volunteers as from the data that we were provided. And what you're going to see is you have some younger folks, and they're very engaged and involved. When I had a chance to sit down and speak with them one-on-one, I'm going to give you one story real quick. Just a young man came in, actually had his infant in a carrier, and he came in to talk to me, and he was really excited because he was going to go home and his wife's going to take care of the child. He was going to come back and get a pickup so he could answer calls that night. What level of dedication? He was ready, willing, and able, right? And he wasn't the only one. That was just one example. But, I think they very engaged, involved. You see folks like that and you have a little twinkle. Hey, that was kind of what I used to do, So it was one of those pieces that is very encouraging. And you have some folks that are more up on my end of the scale with a few years behind them, but they provide a tremendous value to your organization as well. Okay, they may not be able to do physics. Some may not be able to physically do all interior work, but there's a lot of support work that's needed, and there's a lot of services and functions for the department that are very well needed as well. But one of the things I hope that this chart articulates to you is you have a younger group and you have an older group. You do not have very many people in the middle. Okay, so I think that is a demographic that you need to understand, and it's probably greater of the greater Southern Shores area a little bit too, in some of the demographics here in your community. But that is a little unusual. We try to look at that factor when we look at the volunteer departments and staffing, and it's a little unusual to see that contrast quite as much. There's always a contrast, just not quite that much. Okay. We looked at some of your ISO coverages and distance. ISO is the Insurance Services Office. That's the savings that your fire department generates for your residential properties and all of your commercial properties. And it's really significant. We can show you some data on that later if you're interested. But the point is we look at the coverage distance for your engines, the coverage distance for your ladders, and you're in pretty good shape with that piece as well. The graph on the right does show your Station 2 coverage out there off of Duck Road and East Dogwood Trail. So we show you those visuals and just looked at some of the basic coverage from an ISO perspective to see if there was anything that needed attention or you as policymakers and decision makers needed to know. But overall, your jurisdiction is covered very well. So we talked about point one, when we think about the time. Point two, firefighting's hard work. Point three that I'd come around to is that in your situation, I truly wish I could give you a different forecast, but I'm here to bring you a forecast to say that based on what we're seeing in the trends and timelines here, that more funding is going to be necessary for your fire service in the future. I am the messenger, so I want to make sure that you recognize that. But we're going to talk about staffing, obviously, because that's what our core of what brought us to come to you. But everything that firefighters use has increased dramatically in cost. So when I retired a few years ago as fire chief in Greensboro, we were buying fire engines several a year every year. We have over 600 firefighters in the department. We were accustomed to paying a certain amount. Since that time, literally, the cost of fire engines have doubled in cost since 2019, 2020. It's doubled in cost. And so tremendous. It's not just engines. It's other pieces of equipment that's absolutely essential for your firefighters. Breathing equipment, radio equipment, all those pieces, that extrication tools, all those pieces have dramatically increased in cost. And one reason that I'm talking to 9 groups in 8 days is they're in budget work sessions trying to figure out, honestly, how do we pay for this? Because our systems we've been using may not meet our needs in the future. And part of that is obviously personnel, but part is just equipment cost. And I wish we had something we could do about that, but it's a significant challenge across our state right now. But number 3, again, some additional funding. We looked at your financial review of the department, and you have some of the detailed data, but your department is comparatively strong. Again, your paperwork and your data and information and the audits, all very solid. And your auditor uses general accounting methods and best practices. Part of that is looking at depreciation. And so that affects the way that this review is done, because you look at some of your equipment that's getting older and it's depreciating in value, and that has to show up when you look at audits. And so that was part of the review, and wanted to see where your CPA had placed the numbers and data. Your department has 4 primary loans at this point. One, and the largest, is your facility. And that comes out to over $314,000 per year. They pay that quarterly. You, as the town, fund that through the Southern Shores Volunteer Fire Department, Inc. But that is the largest from an auditing perspective. That is clearly the largest piece. When you take the station away, the percentages drop dramatically. I'd have to look to make sure, but it's like 7.5% if the station is not there. So that station debt is pretty significant, and it obviously has an impact on the numbers. They have a few other loans that are in place. A ladder truck that's about 5 years old has a $550,000 remaining. It's going to be complete in 2030. Your other 2 are rather minor. One is an air pack loan. It's only got 1 more year, and a chief officer vehicle that only has 4 years remaining. So, those are just the things you have to look at. Our role is to try to give you information and make sure you know what the picture looks like. And that's why this financial section is important to this type of review. Now, we also could take you around the department, and a lot longer than you want to be in this session here tonight, and talk to you, though, about some efficiencies. And we saw a lot of those. We had a chance to be at the station, see what was happening, meet the people doing this work. I'll use just one example. You have a volunteer who, and I know a lot about apparatus cost. I can't fix anything, but I know how much it costs because I paid those bills for many years. I was fire chief about 17 years and paid lots of bills for apparatus. You've got a volunteer who has a background, as an example, this is just one of many, working for Ford Motor Company. So he looks after your apparatus, and I can tell he does that with, polishes everything, looks at everything to a great degree. Very thorough, very knowledgeable person. He is being a great steward for your department and for your town. That's just one example. You have other people that bring expertise to the table, and I think that is important that you recognize. We saw, just in the short time we were there, we saw a lot of that. And so that's a positive, but there are a number of efficiencies that's happening. Apparatus repair, especially as your trucks are getting a little bit older, can be a significant piece of your finance components and cost. But I would alert you to just a couple things with your with the cost piece of this. So, beyond the staffing cost, there are some major capital assets, and your station is clearly the first part of that and the largest part of that. But I would bring to your attention some of the apparatus. Your ladder is relatively new. We did not do a mechanical evaluation. After I met your mechanic, I don't know that my mechanic could have found things that he hadn't already found and fixed, quite honestly. But sometimes we are asked to do mechanical evaluations. But your apparatus is getting some age on it. You have one that's 19 years old. You have a couple that are 16 years old. Now, that's back again to there's no law that says you have to release apparatus or equipment at a certain age. There is a standard that says, when you reach a certain age, you need to be planning for replacement because parts are harder to get, maintenance goes up, and there is a point that your maintenance gets higher than cost of operation. And I see that in an urban environment, a little bit different than you'll see here. But we need to let you know that several pieces of that equipment is getting in that 20-year range. The standard really looks at when you're in that 20 to 25-year range, is there a way to move that equipment to a reserve status or, keep it if you need that, but move it to reserve to make the life of that equipment last longer. Fire engines today, easily $1 million, probably more than that. And it takes about 3 years to get one when you order it. So they'll easily exceed $1 million. We have been using a very conservative number based on our reviews and purchases in North Carolina. We've looked at what that is, and a very conservative number of $900,000 because there's some communities that'll buy a commercial type truck versus a heavy duty trucks like you use here in the municipality. So ladder trucks, I was in Belmont last week, and they've just recently taken possession of a new ladder over $2.5 million, and they don't even have it fully in service yet. So it's that new, but they waited almost 3 years for that as well. So that's a factor that we just need to flag to you, is that you have 3 trucks that are getting a little bit older in age. So going the wrong way, my apology. Skipped it. So let me recap. So some of the pieces that we wanted to recap. We talked about 3 key things. 1, time being very critical. 2, the work is labor intensive, and 3, additional funding is going to be needed. So kind of keep those premises in the back of your mind moving forward. So we were asked to look at all the aspects of the chief's request and fire department's request with some additional personnel. And we looked and had a lot of discussion with our team and looked at the data and information. And there's several pieces to us that are very clear. First, we support, as your consultant here, and that's our role with the league as well, we support you continuing a volunteer system. We want to be very clear about that. You have a strong volunteer system today, and we think that can continue to serve Southern Shores for the years to come. We don't know how long, but you have a strong force today. You have very talented people. You have a lot of dedication. In our survey, we asked some specific questions for specific reasons. And one of those was to look at the little bit of the culture and the vibe, if you will, of the department. And it's very positive. You had many more folks with a positive outlook that participate in our survey than not. And that really reinforced what we saw on the one-on-ones as well. But we think a volunteer system, especially for a community that prides itself in volunteers, it still has life in Southern Shores. We think you still have a viable reason to continue a volunteer fire department here, just as you have been served well with for many, many years. We think that it can continue to serve Southern Shores, but your volunteers need some help and assistance. And so will they be able to do that on their own without assistance? We'll address that. The second box here is just saying that our team reviewing this looked at the request, and the request is really to have a company officer on duty at all times. Now, volunteers, speaking as a, actually I'm still a current volunteer, but speaking, from that background, volunteers have to feel needed. They have to feel I'm needed. I have value. It's important that I get up and I leave my family and I go into this incident to help. That need to serve, that need to make a difference is very driving for most volunteers. And so the chief's proposal of having a person there on an all the time basis, we'll call it a shift coverage, having a person there who can ensure that the truck is out, ready to go, operating and awaiting volunteers to arrive to go with them is we think very prudent, because it's establishing a baseline, but it says to the volunteers, we still need you. So if one person's there, then that person, he or she, needs 3 other people to get with them on the truck to go to the call. So are not in any way that we see with that proposal replacing those volunteers. You're supplementing them with a baseline. So we support that. We think it's a prudent step to take. Number 3, and this one's kind of in the middle for a lot of reasons. Number 3, the green box, is that we look at the importance of these people that are placed into this role, however many of the people that may be. Whoever that is will be critical to the future of your volunteerism. If you want to keep a volunteer department, you've got to have folks with the right mindset, the right leadership skills, the right people skills to facilitate that. They're going to be making decisions on incidents. They're going to be working with the volunteers. In looking at the proposal and listening to your firefighters as well, they're going to have a key role in training and providing training for firefighters, whenever that might be. Hey, we've got a group here, let's train on this tonight. Okay, and so training is important to your firefighters. But those people that are selected for that role are critical to the success of not only the program, but also to your department. If you have the right people there who have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to perform well in the job and can help bridge gaps with your volunteers, you'll be able to have a stronger volunteer system. So that's placed in the middle because that's a very pivotal point, right? If you think seesaw, what's in the middle? That's your base, because whoever you have in those roles will make a very important difference into the volunteerism of the future. Next, we would also agree with the piece that for Southern Shores to attract top quality talent, the people who you want in those roles, who I think the chief wants in those roles, who I would want in those roles, you want to be able to offer something that everyone else isn't offering. And so we agree with that. The chief's proposal was to look at a 24/72 type schedule. We have come back and offered an alternative to consider. It's a 48/96 schedule. But regardless, doing something different than all your neighbors provides you an opportunity to be potentially an employer of choice, whether it be you as the town or Southern Shores Volunteer Fire Department, Inc., whoever that employer is. When you offer something different, then you potentially can attract people in your area and in your region. So we agree with that. And last, we've looked at some of the salaries. We've been doing our team's actually been doing some salary work for an entire county and system. So we look at your numbers and we agree that person, that company officer role for the fire department is in the neighborhood, if you will, of where that police sergeant is. That was the request, and we think those dollar amounts are certainly appropriate. And having worked in other systems where we've had pay plans, fire and police pay plans, those two positions almost always line up. So the chief's proposal, if I understand everything correctly, we think is positive because it could create a career ladder. They're called company officers. They might come in depending upon their skill set and their experience level, they might be either a lieutenant or a captain. It depends upon their abilities. If they were to come in as a lieutenant, then there would be a career path for them, a career ladder to become a captain. So that's positive as well. But having that structure on the fifth item, we agree with. So many of these pieces, our team fully agrees with as proposed, and think that these are valid and, again, prudent steps to take. So you have some choices. As you look at the best way to move forward, you as an organization have some choices to make. We do support the initiative and feel like that is a need within your community to sustain your organization and sustain the levels of service that the people in your community have become accustomed to. One reason we do the analysis and look so deep at the times is you need to know where you're coming from. This is the level of service this was providing. If you make a change, you want to look at that again. Well, what has changed? Has the level of service improved? Has the level of service decreased? So we've given you a baseline as to what your level of service has been since 2018. And if you make a change, then you're able to see what differences that has made as well. But we do think one option is you could continue a contract, maybe with some more board engagement, maybe with a different contract if you choose to do that. But you could continue to contract and pay additional funds to your department. Our financial analysis says the department is in a comparatively strong position, but they don't have the money they do not have the money to add the personnel needed. They don't have that level of cushion or buffer. In fact, your department's not cushioning any money. They're spending the money that they're receiving, which is appropriate for a public service, private nonprofit organization. They have appropriate levels of reserves, just as you have to have with the local government commission, so you recognize that, but they're not funded to the point to add the additional people without some additional funding. So one, you could contract and help fund that through the town. A couple concerns with that is that as a private nonprofit organization, Southern Shores Volunteer Fire Department can't utilize what's known as the 7K exemption. It's an exemption for local governments only, for firefighters in local governments that have different hours that they work before they earn overtime. Under the system that your chief is working on today, they don't have that luxury or ability. All their funding can come from local government, but if they're not direct local government employees, they can't use that provision. So your chief proposed 4 people, as I said a few minutes ago. Well, that's appropriate because he can't, if he has 3 people, those 3 people are going to be making so much money in overtime that it would be more efficient to have the 4th person. That's very logical. But that is a concern. The other one is that as a private nonprofit corporation, they are not able to participate in the North Carolina Local Government Employee Retirement System. And if you're looking for talent in North Carolina anyway, if you're looking for talent who you want to have in those positions, remember that green box in the middle, the pivot, then you're really wanting people who have experience and skill sets and top candidates. And so if you're seeking someone who maybe is working in for another municipality or county government, they're probably, they're already in the local government retirement system. And once they're vested, it's going to be a real challenge to get them to consider leaving. Some might, but we think that's worth noting to you. The other is that other option is you could look at moving forward with a merger situation, whereas the town of Southern Shores would be fully responsible for the fire department, just as you are all of your other operating departments. And then any additional employees that would be added as full town employees. And we would certainly recommend that your existing employees at the department become town employees as well, all in one system. Some of the requirements there is that all of the employees have to ultimately report to your manager. And the council manager form of government, they have to report to the manager. You're insured. The department today has an insurance provider called VFIS. If you were to pull the department under the town, you'd probably still have VFIS for certain pieces, but there's certain pieces you would not. Some of the ones you would not would be workers' comp, and then certainly some liability pieces. All that's under the League of Municipalities. So, as you think about that, you would have full responsibility for the department. It would be an operating department of the town, and there's a process to follow to do that. And I put that in your book, some pieces of that. There's one, I'm kind of like the emergency plan. There's a long piece. It's not necessarily in there, but we can provide you electronically about how that looks. But it is a legal document, that type of agreement. I yield to your attorney with this. Some call that a definitive agreement, merger agreement. So it carries some different terminology, but it's just where one group and the other say, this is something we want to do. It's for the public good. Let's work out the details of how this would work, the timeline, the pros, cons, consents, those type of things. We always recommend a resolution to show commitment from both organizations, and that is in your booklet as well as an example. We work with quite a few municipalities. We have 2 that are merging this July 1 as an example this year. So, we go through this process and we found it to work very, very well. So the resolution is a first level commitment, and then the definitive agreement, which would be between your town attorney and the fire department's attorney, is your binding agreement. So those are really the 2 parts. I had a fire chief put it pretty well. He said, when the resolution is really like an engagement. This is the engagement. Yeah, this is something we want to do. But the definitive agreement is really the marriage that says, okay, this is what we're doing, and then we're going to make this official. So those are the 2 options we would see. One of the things I would underline and highlight, and I think I tried to underline that there, is that all operations would come under the town in our recommendation to you. In other words, all your volunteers. So if you take the department, remember that chain of command, your chief, assistant chief, deputy chief, all reporting to the town manager. So should that work for your volunteers? That's what happens in most cases, and it happens very successfully. There are many 514 municipalities, many municipalities that have volunteers within their service delivery system, and we think that is viable for Southern Shores as well. Call volume, temperament of your personnel, facility, assets, all those pieces would certainly indicate that. So we think that those are some key choices. Is that something you want to continue in a contractual environment, or is that something that you want to look at a merger opportunity? I'll list a few things here and I'll touch on this quickly. Just when you're thinking about considering a merger, there needs to be tangible enhancement that happens. Something has to improve with service delivery. If you're going to step out there and do that, service delivery has to be impacted. Service delivery is at the core of everything we do, so it's not different in this case as well. Moves that help your retention and recruitment of your personnel, and especially as you try to keep a volunteer system, it applies to that too. So if your employees become town employees, they're going to have the ability to have that local government employee retirement system piece. That's a great benefit. But also, I encourage you, remember your volunteers as well, because if you take all that operation, how are you going to strengthen that? It's also hoped that by having those people on each shift, that there can be more focus on retention and recruitment efforts of your volunteers. Keep the people you have, work hard to bring new people into the system. And then improvements in efficiencies. I have yet to work on a merger that reduced cost, but every merger I've worked with has improved efficiencies. As a municipal chief, we absorbed and merged with private nonprofit corporations during my time in that role. And then as a consultant now, the last few years, working with the league and the association, in every case, there's been improved efficiencies. But I haven't had any one of those that has been a necessarily cost and savings. It might be a cost avoidance, though. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. And then continuity of the fire department, because if you are able to keep the system you have and primarily be dependent upon volunteers, the savings to that is enormous. And so it's about sustainability. Does this move help our sustainability? And so those are some questions that you should be thinking about. And when you can answer yes to those, then it's typically successes for mergers. A couple that fail most often is if there's no savings and there's no efficiencies gained and you're doing the same thing, your status quo, then you have to ask yourself your question. We sure put a lot of work into this. What has changed? So you have to ask yourself that question. Did service delivery improve? Sometimes different cultures are a challenge, and that's noted as well. Fear of change, it is different. So does that become a barrier to you? And then subgroups that really, may not get on board. And you don't want to have too many of those subgroups that don't get on board, or you have a situation to deal with and manage. So as you're thinking about potential mergers, here's just some of the considerations there as well. So some next steps moving forward. You've got lots of data and information, about 180 pages, I think, to look at. If you finish your hazard mitigation plan, you move right to that and you'll be asleep pretty quickly. But it does have important data, and look at that. There is a lot in there that's visual, and that's by intention, so that you can see what's happening and gather data on incidents or financials and see it in a visual way. Number two, we would recommend to you to have potentially some representatives of the council and some representatives of the fire department meet, what I'll call meet and confer. All right, this is something that came up. We took it seriously. We moved on it quickly. We brought in a group to look at this. This is what they've recommended. Where are we? What are our next steps? Is this feasible? And a group roundtable discussion. Okay, so whether we facilitate that or we don't, that is what we would say is really a next step. And it's a case of where some representatives of the council would be most effective with some representatives of the fire department. You put two people in one room, it becomes much more difficult to have clear outcomes. So we would think that's the course of action that is appropriate. And it may take a while. So we would say to you, there might be some interim steps that need to be considered. And that's the type of discussion that can come forward in that type of group. But we would say to you also, don't discount efforts for volunteerism. You just can't let up on that, because if you're going to primarily be a volunteer system, which we support and we agree with, that's got to be a focus. Whatever your discussions are, whatever work happens between now and then, that's really got to be a key focus for you. And with that, I'll be glad to take any questions that you might have.
That's a lot.
I recognize it is. Sorry.
But it was presented very, very well, and I did really good information for us to use. Sorry, go ahead, Robert.
No, as an ex-academic who taught graduate school, it was, the methodology, everything going through, dealing with organizational culture besides the statistics and everything else. It was very professionally done, and it was also very, very professionally presented in terms of the actual study and your PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
We think it's important to do qualitative and quantitative. In your report, you'll see the quantitative numbers and where people were at. But qualitative is really important too, because you really have to look at where is everyone coming from and not just taking a response without some context. If that's the example I gave with the mechanic that's doing work is an example of that. If we hadn't had that one-on-one, I wouldn't have realized how much value that person brings to the organization. So qualitative and quantitative is helpful.
I guess my question would be, are you still going to be available in case we have to come back with you to you for some questions as we go?
We're here to help
on this
support
journey?
you. Yes, Ms. Mayor.
Okay,
We're
so-
here to help you and support you.
Because I
Anything
think
we
it's going to be
can.
important.
I do live in Burlington, so it's quite a ways here.
Yeah.
But we can effectively,
Yeah.
we do a lot of these, even the ones that I'm, that are moving to finalization July. We even alternate those. So we'll go on site for 1 month, and then the next month we do virtual. So I mean that's very effective when you're looking at all those options, and anything we can do to help facilitate that, we're certainly glad to try to do. One of my team members is in Rocky Mount, so that's not all that far. So we can find a way to hopefully help with that.
Great. Thank you.
Is there an average timeline for about how long this kind of merger takes?
Typically, I would speak to my experience with that, more so that I don't know that there's anything published because it's organization by organization. Typically, mergers occur on a July 1 because they become part of the budget. And whatever your fiscal year is when mergers typically occur. Now, as I said earlier, there could be some interim steps that you may choose to make or something like that. But, I think that what I have seen is there's about roughly a year's work in most organizations to look at all these pieces and parts. We developed these task lists, and I'll tell you that like one I'm working on has over 100 points, another one has about 90, and we go piece by piece. This is the minutia. This is the details, right? The devil's in the details, so to speak. But we break all this down, communications piece, operations, financial, all the different pieces, and pull the right people in to have all those discussions. But the others I've worked with have about a year in that process. And then once the transition occurs, we always recommend that there's about a 6-month delay past that point. So like the ones that I have that are merging July 1 officially, they've been working on this. They're well prepared, but they still they've got to pay people up through June 30th out of their organization before the municipality steps in July 1. Well, those people may still have benefits issues. They still got to have 1099s issued or W-2s issued, whatever that might be. That's got to happen as well. Organizations that are no longer functioning that way still have to have what's called tail insurance in case something else comes up they're not aware of. So I like to say about a year and a half, about a year ahead, and as much as six months behind is what I see in North Carolina. That and we're working with the second largest fire department in North Carolina that is not a municipal department. That's town of Garner. And so that's very public. We've been working with them, but they're the second largest municipality that's not part of the municipality, but July 1, they will be. So it's taken some time. Important pieces for you there is having those discussions. I like to say, what are the big rocks with this? What are the key issues that you need to discuss and look at from both sides, and try to have maybe the representatives or designees of the council be able to voice that, as well as the fire department, and work out and compromise.
Cost. Did you calculate an estimated cost for making these changes?
Yes, ma'am, and it depends upon which model you choose. The cost is higher for funding the private nonprofit corporation, because we concur that because they can't use the 7K schedule and the overtime, that 4 people would be needed to do that. Under the municipal model, whether you chose there's 2 different primary schedules you can use. If you want to choose the schedule that other nearby municipalities are using, it's called a 2448. Your neighbors are using that. If you want something different, 4896. But at the end of the day, it's still 212 hours and 28 days. So no matter which of the 2 that you use. So there's 2 numbers, and those numbers are in your document. I don't want to misquote them from memory, but they're fairly significant. It's, if I'm not mistaken, over $100,000 difference in the 2.
They're not in this.
They're in the binder.
They're in
It's
the
like
binder.
We're in the
405.
appendix.
Yeah. Well, no, it's in the general body
We
report.
just saw this.
Yeah. I was reading kind of out of order, flipping
Sure.
back and forth. 479
And
4 and like 380.
380. It's
And
that number's there. It's in the financial section.
that didn't include any equipment. or anything.
Correct.
That's just.
Just
That's just
personnel.
That doesn't include.
It does look at some of the benefits pieces and things like that, but primarily around the personnel. Yes, sir.
I think I answered all my questions. The comments in the survey are individual comments, not yours, right?
That's correct.
Right.
Everything in the survey represents your firefighters. What you will see, again, in talking to the group, the choices were made by the group, or by the larger individual discussions. And then the survey is to reinforce that, to see is that where everyone is, in that. So everything you see there is all from your personnel.
Can you, I think I understand it, but can you walk me through like one of the graphs, like in the survey for question 2, it says, what do you identify the greatest strengths? And then I guess a number of people, it's their top priority, the statement, and then I guess the other statements are ranked, it's just a ranking of the
Yes, so
statements.
they place those, and I've given you a summary in your executive summary of what that says as well, in each of those choices, but they were asked to say of these positives or of these gaps, what's number one? What do you feel like is number one? What's number two? What's number three? And it's a rank order, but it is totally based on what the group gave us. In other words, those weren't created. These were the statements their colleagues had given. So it's just simply helping to validate the rank order of
And then
the
the
response.
0, 10, 20 is just a % of response. Is that the bottom line? of the graph?
Most likely, yes, sir. I'd have to see what you're looking
I
at.
was,
Most
I would,
likely.
I just visually.
We had
seeing
19
is
people
different.
complete the survey, so it's depending upon the percentages are going to be reflective of how many
the 19.
people chose
Got
that.
And then the other question, I am very naive about this whole concept of 24/7 and was it 24/48, 24/72, 24/48.
4896.
So I work for
Yeah.
24 hours, get 48 off.
Yeah, so one model that what the chief proposed, if it was to stay within a situation where you couldn't use the 7K exemption, would be I work 24 hours and I get 72 off. In the municipal local government side in North Carolina, typically it is you can use the 7K. The most common schedules out there across the state are either the direct 24/48, I work 24 hours, I'm off 48, or a variation of that. There's some that when I served chief in Asheville, every third weekend they got an extra day or something. There's variations of it, but it all works out the same number of hours in a 28-day period. What I will call a newer schedule that is out there now that many are using across the state, and it's significantly growing. At our Chiefs Conference this year, that was one of the highest attended sessions, was a 4896. And there's some positives to that. You have to weigh that out on your call volume and your workload. We recommend it because of your call volume and workload. We felt like that was appropriate for the foreseeable future. As you grow to some point in the future, it may not be. But communities of your size, it's a potential good fit for. Firefighters see that as a value, even if they're not in the immediate area. They don't have to travel back and forth as much, which is less wear and tear, fuel in their vehicle, that type of thing, but they're on duty a longer period of time. So I think some of the most common, if volunteer organizations do use the 24/72, EMS uses that because EMS doesn't qualify for the 7K exemption either. So they use that schedule, but 24/48 or 4896 or variants of that's probably most common across North Carolina.
And there's some financial implications of different choices, but it's also a recruitment choice.
Exactly. And that's where we concur with the chief by saying, I got to offer something different than everybody around me. If I want the top talent, how can Southern Shores be positioned to get the very best people in our area? And I think that's where he was coming from, and we tend to agree with that.
So in a nutshell, because I'm flipping through trying to find it, but the 24/72 was close to 500,000, but there was another one that was about 100,000 less. What was that?
That was 4896.
4896.
And
okay.
it just as easily could be
So 24/48 is not a
yeah, it could be a 24/48. I had another a municipality I'm working with that's up for July 1 merger. The finance director's very astute, very sharp. She was determined that 24/48 and 4896 was going to be a cost difference. She came in with literally a stack of spreadsheets, and she said, it's not a difference. She had tried and couldn't find that to happen. So she tried very diligently. She really tried, but she said, it's the same at the end of the day. And we said, that's what we said. She said, you're right. So, and I have a lot of respect for her. She's very strong professional finance person.
All right. I'm closer. I still get confused, but I got it.
So.
And that's
some
the
of-
overtime. Sorry. Go ahead, Mark. Or Mike.
So some of the municipalities that had these 48/72, 48/96 and all that, how did that set with other departments that have a schedule, police department, for instance? Was
Well,
there any interaction? or
sure.
Was there any, how did the
well, police-
municipalities address that?
Yeah, police have a completely
Right.
different number.
Well, I know they do.
So theirs is 171
You know
and
how people
28.
compare. that's just a normal-
you know that they'll be looking at that. So
It's a normal thing.
it's interesting. We do a good bit of work in Wake County, and one department started that effort. Now 7 other departments have joined them in that same schedule as an example. So, but one did it for a pilot for a year, and is everyone on board and you know, holding hands and seeing kumbaya? Maybe not every person, but generally it's been pretty well embraced in the places that have been moving to that. The work I'm doing up in Buncombe County and Asheville area, they're in the same spot. They're trying to move to that schedule as well.
It's a small community here. There's no secrets.
Right. Understood. Understood.
There's a
But
lot of rumors, though.
There's a lot of rumors, a ton of rumors.
But I think it's important. It's kind of, you know, oil and water situation, because law enforcement's number is very different than fire's number. And there's a reason for that, but it's important to recognize we follow the Fair Labor Standards Act, and we don't make that law, we just follow.
So the 288 number you said in 30 days? They can't
So it's
work
212 in 28 days.
28 days, that's the law. They can't work anymore. than that.
Well, you just have to be compensated. So in other words, that's when the overtime piece comes in. You can work more. You just have,
It costs more.
it starts becoming more costly. And I've gone before quite a few city managers and, you know, showed we're spending more on overtime than it would cost to add a person here. And that's, you have to look at that on a regular basis.
And
That happens in business all the time.
yeah, you do a fairly good job of breaking that out in the report and kind of explaining it in comparison to police salaries. It's hard for us to read it while we're up there.
Understood.
Will you be with us tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. I think I'll reserve some of my follow-up for tomorrow.
Okay.
Appropriate.
I wanted to ask a question about the volunteers. I mean, I don't have the exact number, but we went from 50-some volunteers to 24. Right. I mean, is there anything we can do to reverse that trend? I mean, that's pretty significant.
So I wish I had a, you know, magic bullet for that. I don't, other than to say, I think you have to work on that in a really holistic way. You've got some challenges in your community of people who are capable, willing, and able to do that. You have to find people, when people want to volunteer, you got to find a role for them. My observation, your chief's doing an excellent job of that. When you hire someone who worked for Ford Motor Company to be your mechanic, that's excellent. Okay, so you're using the talent and skills that someone has. But it does take a lot of work to help look for people. And I think you do have to offer things that are different than everyone else around. One of the recommendations you'll see in our report is training. Training is really important. We heard that a lot. All my career, I have found training is a great unifier. Training pulls people together, and training encourages and keeps people motivated. But your department, as I talked with folks, said, hey, one reason I come is the training program. You've got to keep your training program strong. You also have to have an environment where your firefighters and all your volunteers feel like they're needed and essential, have to be there. That's one reason we support this program of having a baseline in place, but volunteers, we still need you. So training, I think, is a piece, you know, all the way down to exit interviews. If someone's not volunteering, you may not think about that as in a volunteer, but it has a place. What can we do to change it? Is there anything we could do? But in many cases, there may not be. The person may be relocating somewhere else. They may be, you know, unable to continue to live in the immediate area. Those type things that you can't necessarily change. But
Because it seems
looking
like
at it.
we're actively recruiting. My son, when he came out of the Marine Corps, was a volunteer firefighter for a while until life just got too complicated to do that. I mean, it's, you know, it's a huge commitment. And then when you're married and have kids and a job, it's pretty tough.
There's a reason you see that age
Yeah, it's,
bar graph of younger people and older people, and no
I
one
saw
in the
that.
middle, right? So,
That's right where he was.
So we'll see you in the morning.
thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time and attention. And again, thank you for the service you provide the people of Southern Shores.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Greg.
you. Can't wait to go home and read this.
Yeah. We don't get a lot of hours off. So, council, the hour is getting late. Does anyone have any interest in skipping council business?
I prepared for hours, though.
I tell you. Because we have to spend some quality time together all day tomorrow.
We can do it.
Okay?
We do it then.
So let's just say we are meeting tomorrow. We've got some snacks at 8:30. We'll kick it off at 9 a.m. We'll be right here in this room. The agenda has been shared and published. If anyone has any interest in any specific issue, please know that we will have the opportunity to hear anything you want to say and share with us, or if you want to ask questions. The only thing I would say is we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So again, we want to be inclusive. We want to hear what you have to say. Our next regular council meeting will be April the 1st. That's April Fool's Day.
Oh, dear.
So we don't really.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you very much, folks.
So we're moving back.